Hello, everyone. So welcome to today's session. This is going to be a little bit of a self journey as we go through the session today, because it is all about how to lead through change and a little bit different perspective than maybe you typically think about as a leader, of nurturing people one by one versus one to many. And when we go through change, there's a lot of fear and that rises for people. But what happens is, a lot of times as leaders, we haven't done some self-exploration ourselves to really uncover what holds us back, what patterns of behavior that we have. And when we better understand ourselves, then we can better understand the people around us. So that is what being a connected leader is about. And what I'm going to start with is the fact that I know, as far as leadership, when I went through starting out in my career, many times people said, as a leader, separate yourself and make sure that you never get too close to your people, and you never know why, if you need to eliminate someone and so forth. And so this is a little bit different perspective, because I think it is important for our people to understand who we are and what drove us in our careers to get to the place that we are today. And part of what happens is, when we look at social media, when people read our backgrounds, we see all of these accolades, and I'm a yoga teacher and I have this happy family, and my LinkedIn profile shows all of my awards. But what it doesn't show is my backstory. And a lot of us don't talk about our backstories and what actually drove us to be here today in these roles. And a lot of times when people look at us as leaders, they think, oh, things must have just come easy for that person and they just got here. But really, what's happened over time is we've had to go through a lot in our own personal lives to get where we are today. So my story is that my life changed very quickly when I was in high school. I had a mother that was an entrepreneur, a grandmother that was an entrepreneur. I grew up in an entrepreneur family, and I worked in her business from the time I was young. I got dropped off from the bus when I was 12 years old to work in her business every day. And I also, in tandem, played violin and viola. And I spent a lot of time playing music. And I was always conflicted of which way I was going to go as I started growing up, getting closer to college. But at 16 years old, my mom lost her business because of not some things that were in her control, but she did not have an accounting background. And at the time, for those of you that were around in America, we had the savings and loans crisis. And she had a residential cleaning service that turned into construction cleanup and was paid on bank loans that defaulted. And so at that time, she had to make a choice. Do I pay my payroll, or do I pay my payroll taxes? And so, as you can probably imagine, which choice she made was to pay her people. And so after that time, we lost our house. We lost everything inside of our house. Our life changed very fast. Creditors were after us all of the time, and we started over. And so I made a quick decision in my life that I was going to become a CPA. My grandfather had been a CPA. I had heard about being a CPA, that it was a safe and secure career. And that is the path that I went. And I never looked right or left until later, when I became a partner, where I really got stopped in my tracks when I actually got to the place that I wanted to be, and then realized, how did I get here? What actually drove me to get to this point? And so it really took me on this journey, this pivot of really trying to find how I find happiness in what I'm doing, and make sure I'm not doing it for others, that I'm doing it for my own joy. So this is the journey to becoming a connected leader, that many of us go into our careers and lead based on our skill sets, based on our expertise. But what happens is that there's all these people that need us as we grow in our careers, and we're really focused on our achievements and the things that we need to do. And sometimes we don't make the time that we need for the people around us to ensure that they're being nurtured and they're getting what they need in order to grow in their roles. And so my first example of becoming a connected leader, or having that example in my head, was actually my violin teacher when I was really young. So I would practice and practice hours and hours, and I would try to get into these orchestras. And before an audition, I'd be really scared and nervous and have fear. And what he would tell me every time is, if you're no good, I'm no good. That's the way it is. He had a Russian accent. So when he did that, I was like, you're right. Even though I'm going in front of these judges, I'm not alone. We're a team, right? That I had to do my part, but he had to do his part for us to be able to grow together. And so if you haven't heard things that I've talked about before, one of the methodologies that I created was the B3 method, which is business plus balance equals bliss. And I like to break up this journey into this map because it helps us to really understand where we are and what to practice along the way. And the business side of this is the stressors that we have in our lives. So we have stressors in our career of deadlines. We have coworkers that stress us out, all of those things, and also family demands that get in our way of actually making progress. The balance piece of this, so for those of you that don't know my background, I'm a CPA, but I'm also a yoga instructor. And so I've really taken those techniques that I have learned through yoga of the 18 years that I've done, of these natural tools that we have inside of us of mindfulness and collaboration, in order to offset these stressors that we have in our life. But just like when you go on a diet, just like when you exercise, you have to practice these tools so that they come up naturally for you when you need them, and that you can be present with the people around you in order to create bliss. And what bliss is the maintenance of happiness. So when we hear happiness, a lot of times what we think of is it happening to us, or parties like we had last night that were so much fun. But when you think about that feeling of that joy that you have, how do you create that yourself, have the responsibility to create that happiness each day? And we've got to be able to attach to what that feeling is in order to create that joy, because especially as a leader, our energy is contagious, whether we realize it or not. And so the energy we want to create has to be with intention so that we can create a better energy with the people around us. So let's start the journey. The journey is on the business side. And one of the things that we find when we do our own exploration, whether it's ourselves, whether it's the people around us, is it can be Groundhog Day. Is that we're actually told over and over in our lives the same type of feedback. If we look at the patterns, we have people at work that give us feedback. We've got staff that we hear give us feedback. We've got people in our personal lives that give us feedback. And then it's our choice whether we listen to it, whether we actually hear the through line in all of that and decide whether that feedback matters and we're going to actually take action on it, rather than what we typically do as humans is blame the outside for that. It must be their fault we're getting that feedback. And it's the same thing that we see with people that work for us, is a lot of times with feedback, it's hard for them to take it in. And so we've got to think about, how do we take in feedback so that we can give it better to the people around us? So with that, we have these belief systems that we hold true in our bodies. These belief systems can come from generational patterns, our families, people that told us things that we should be or do or how to show up. I remember even starting in accounting, all of the belief systems that were embedded in me around time and billing, around the way you dress, around the getting there before your boss and leaving after your boss. All of those things became belief systems that we carry. But part of the role of a connected leader is to step back and say, are those my beliefs or are those somebody else's beliefs? And to really assess, is that the way we want to walk through our lives and with the people around us, and maybe change that belief system if it doesn't really align with who we are? Because a lot of times what I hear, especially with all the staffing issues when I'm working with accounting firms, is, they just don't get it. I had to go through so much more when I was becoming partner, and these people don't want to work, and so forth. But it's just a different perspective. And what I will say is, when I was their age, I didn't want to work the way that we work, right? If we really think about that time period of what that's like, why do we keep putting it on other people instead of actually thinking about the process and how we can actually change the way our culture runs? So this is where we actually step back and think about, why do we believe the things that we do? And so going back to the stories that I had in my past, because of what I saw with my mom losing her business, in my head, I was like, I'm playing it safe. There's no way I ever want to go through that with my family, or I don't want my employees or their families to suffer as well. So a lot of the decisions I made along the way in my career were to play it safe. And then once I got to starting my own business, I actually had thought originally, well, I'll just have bookkeepers and I'll have those bookkeepers do the work and bring in the work. And then I start my business and I start getting phone calls from client prospects, and they're asking me to come out and train them on QuickBooks or whatever software that they were using. And I was not prepared for that. That was not what I thought this business was going to be. So I went out to my first client to do it, because I was like, at the time, this was like 2001, and there was very little education around software like there is today when you become an advisor. And so I literally taken the test to become a pro advisor, and that was it. So I go out to this client, and he's asking me all these questions about QuickBooks, and then he shows me undeposited funds, which as a CPA I had never heard of ever. And so I'm like, okay, how do I handle this? And so I paused and said, let me get back to you on that. Because the fear started coming up that I was doing something that was out of my wheelhouse, my expertise. But what I learned was, he didn't care that I didn't know the answer right then, that I could be learning on this job, that I could be exploring and growing as I do this job, as long as I tell them when I'm going to get the answer. And so it's finding your guardrails in whatever is holding you back in growing a business or growing your own business or a service line within your firm, whatever you're doing, is finding how you put those guardrails around taking risk. Where do you know your exit? And I compare it to yoga, that a lot of people want to do handstands and headstands in a yoga class. And what I always tell them is, know how you're going to fall, right? Like, how are you going to get out of it if you fall over? And so it's no different in business. Is if you start seeing that something's going the wrong path, how do you protect yourself along the way so you can take those risks? And so what happens a lot of time with these belief systems is we hold on to them so hard. And I see this every day when I work with accounting firms, that there's just no way we could change this, right? This is the way it's always been. This is the way the profession is. But when this happens, we just haven't felt the pain enough. And until we feel the pain enough, that's when belief systems start changing. And so what we need to start thinking about with change, and as we manage through change, is that there's play and delight in change. That when we have uncertainty, we can find ways to be okay to not go down the right path, that we have to fail fast. So when we see we're not going down the right path, where are the guardrails to shift, make sure that you're finding the right path as you go along the way. But to allow that atmosphere or environment in your business so that people can fail. What I see a lot in innovation is that what happens when we're trying to do new things in our businesses or our firms, that people are afraid to try something new because they get branded. And when they get branded, it lasts throughout their career in that firm. I have sat in manager meetings where they're saying 3 years ago someone did something, and that's still what they're thinking about that person. So how can we really make this where it's comfortable to try and innovate and do new things and allow different projects to happen in our firm as a leader? And so what is true about all of this is that whatever you think the reality is in your situation, or when you're putting something forward as a leader, your staff sees something completely different. Your partner sees something completely different. And that is where this perception versus reality, we've got to come to this place of figuring out where's the truth. And as a leader, if we step back and get more present, it really can help us with getting to this place of truth, of rather than having our reality colored. And that is because this is something we hold on to tight. Because we have these belief systems that we want to push forward, but other people are pushing at us. And whether we open ourselves up to what they have to say and take in their feedback, we're going to keep struggling against the current when we don't take in that feedback, when we're not open to what others are saying. And so a lot of this is caused by our own ego. And this happens naturally as we become a leader. Because as we become a leader, we become more and more expert. People ask us all the time to answer their questions for them. And we've always got to have this answer. We've got to show we're a leader. But really, what happens is when we're holding tight and when we're in the struggle, it is truly the root of all unhappiness. Is when we start letting go of this, it helps us to actually enjoy change, enjoy leading, enjoy listening, and actually bring in a team approach rather than one by one. So I'm just going to play a little video here of where we have this problem every day when your staff come to talk to you and you try to solve their problems and so forth. So I just want you to watch this video.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just...
Don't.
So I play that because how many times have you had staff people come in for advice? You know what the answer is, but they don't want to hear it. They're really just there. They want to talk, right? They want you to just listen. And so it is really important that we think about how we go about that. When we know the answer is so obvious, how do we guide them to a point of finding the right answer themselves, right? Of being present and being able to understand what is going on or what is the root of the issue that they are coming to us. And so there is a book that is a great book about this, and it's called Leadership and Self-Deception. And it's all about the fact that most people know what the right thing to do is every single day. But the problem is we go against it. That we don't actually want to do the right thing because it's going to take us too much time and so forth. So they use an example in this book that is easier for us to relate to, which is a new parents that have an infant, and the infant wakes up crying in the middle of the night. And the wife had been getting up every single night for weeks to feed the baby, and the husband wakes up and his wife is dead asleep, not waking up from the baby crying. And so the first thing he thinks about is, oh my gosh, she's so tired. She's been getting up every night. I should really get up and go feed the baby. And then he lays there and he's like, if I go and get that baby, then it's really going to take a half an hour to get it ready, go feed the baby. Then I've got to clean up afterward. And then it's going to take me time to go back to sleep. And by the time I get back to sleep, it's going to be time to get up and go to work in the morning. And then I'm going to be tired all day the next day. And as he's thinking about this, he turns to his wife and she's still asleep. And he's like, why is she still asleep? There's no way she could be sleeping through this baby crying. There's no way she's not waking up. And now he's getting mad at his wife. And those are the things that happen all day at work, right? Is that we know initially in our gut what the right thing is to do. We should probably take time, step back, work with that person, try to train them on something. But then we start going, oh my God, if I do that, I'm going to work a half an hour longer today. I don't have the time. And then you start getting frustrated with that person. And so this is really what it's about, is how do we make that time to separate ourselves so that we can take responsibility? And what this is called is 100% responsibility. Because when we walk away from people, we usually blame the other person for a bad experience instead of stepping back and saying, what was my 100% responsibility? And this was an interview I did with Dr. Tai Mo, and he was talking about this concept.
Harder line approach, but in the workplace as an employer, a lot of times I'm talking to my team about, there's a saying I heard a long time ago, you can have results or excuses, but not both. And like a simple example would be just showing up on time. And years ago, I had a team member who, it felt like 90% of the time, she couldn't find her car keys, or there was traffic, or there's construction outside her place, or her window was frozen shut, or it was like, wow, it was never her fault, even though somehow for her, 90% of the time she didn't make it on time to our meeting.
Right.
It made me realize that the other saying that I teach my team is, how you do anything is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. And so as the boss, as the manager, as the employer, like I can't justify, ooh, that's a good excuse, that's not a good excuse. I just have to look at the patterns and what are the tendencies. And guess what? If you're showing up on time most of the time, a few things pop up, I'm not going to worry about it. And so just really understanding that, like what you do, the actions you take, the self-responsibility that you take is going to be the biggest thing.
So that is how we lead others to find that answer, but also how we lead ourselves to find that answer when we're seeing that pattern show up as a leader. So what I'd like you to do is scan this QR code, and I'm going to ask you some survey questions as we go through the rest of this. And it will take you right into the survey tool. So as you're in there, you can put your phone down for a second, and I want you to just take both feet to the floor, and we're going to close our eyes for a moment. And then we'll pick it back up. And so I want you to just get still for a moment, get present. And maybe just start focusing on your breath. Inhaling 1, exhale 2. And just count to 10 so that you can settle in. So when I've been talking about this part of just the patterns that show up, and hopefully as we've been going through it, you can keep your eyes closed. I'm going to ask you some questions. That there's a pattern or a habit that you've thought about in yourself, that you've noticed that show up, and maybe some self-talk that happens in your head. Because we have this self-talk that happens every single day that no one can see. So I want you to just focus on what that self-talk might be each day. And it might be the same thing that you think each day, or maybe it's something that's recently happened. And what I want you to ask yourself about that thought is that thought true? And just answer it yes or no in your head. And if you think that thought is true about yourself, can you absolutely know it's true? Yes or no? So when you have that thought or that pattern of behavior, what happens? What is the energy that's created in your body? How do you react to others? And if you were able to release that thought, who would you be without that thought? How might your energy be different? So I'd like you to just come back into this space, opening your eyes, and you can come back to that conference tool. And I want you to just answer that last question. It comes up anonymously. Who would you be without that thought? How might your energy be different? How may your thoughts might be different if you were able to release that? More patient, both externally and internally, a lot more patient. Less anxious, less stressed, less competitive and quick to anger, less judging. I would be less defensive, more direct. I would take on more risks, more human. So when we get in these moments of just getting present, and we actually allow ourselves during the day to get still and kind of just assess what's happening, because a lot of times we just don't take a moment to get present. How might that shift your energy in the day when you're actually thinking about those things and saying, and just observing it? So none of this is judgment, right? And that's a really important thing. So it's not about judging yourself. It's observing it to grow and to learn so that you can show up with different energy during the workday. And that energy is actually going to change how you feel and what the things are that are going to help you. Oh, sorry, there's some extra slides in there. So when we're leading people through change, that part of getting present is really important. And it also is really important to look up and recognize what people are doing. So for me, getting a gold sticker or a smelly sticker when I was younger on a paper made me feel really good. And it's like those little things, right? But as adults, no one is actually giving us a sticker or remembering, because we're all busy in our work all day long. We've all got our heads down all day long. So what's important is that how do we actually change these habits and figure out how to look up as a leader so that we can help people through this change? And there is a way to do it, because we really, with our brains, we get hardened because this is the way we've done things for so long. So in order for us to shift it, we have to practice the shift every single day, just like exercising, to actually change this thought. And so the first thing is actually recognizing the pattern of behavior that we want to change, or the thought we want to change, or how we want to show up each day. And so for me, one of the things, like, to use this example just to kind of help you kind of trigger it, I'm using a simple example, is I like to eat dessert. I love chocolate. So one of the things is it makes me feel good. I need to recognize the behavior, and the trigger is that I continue to do it because it makes me feel good. It's one of those things, it'll just give me a little bit of joy before I go to sleep and so forth. So the stimulus, though, when I look at that habit, is, when is it happening? What time of day is it happening? What kind of emotion am I having? Or what are the people that are around me? What's the preceding action, or what's the location? All of those things matter when we're trying to create a habit. Another one that I did was on meditation, because people assume just because I'm a yogi, I'm a good meditator. That's not true. So it is not something that comes naturally. It's something that I had to build over time, because sitting still was not an easy thing for me to do. So in order for me to do it, I had to go through this process of recognizing that I want to meditate. And in order for me to trigger it, what I needed to do was have a meditation pillow, and I put it in the same spot every day so that I could create the stimulus to make it happen, which meant that the time of day, when I wake up in the morning, that's when I'm going to do it. I had the pillow out. I had to make sure I didn't check my email before I started to meditate, and it's in the same location. And the reason that that became important, and I have to do it for 30 days, every single day, in order to change that habit, right? And so when I would pass that pillow on days I didn't feel like meditating, it pulled me in, right? Because it was the trigger that would be like, oh yeah, I need to meditate. So if we're trying to remember a habit that we want to create as a leader in the business, even let's say to say thank you, that might mean that we've got to put a calendar appointment on our calendar every day to remember to do those things or take that break or whatever we need to do to reset in order to get present so that we can create the environment that we need to actually change that pattern of behavior or that habit. So what is one habit or pattern that you notice that shows up for you in your workday? And you can put it in your survey tool. So what is one thing when I'm talking about that could be something that you commit to in order to change the environment or how you are feeling during the workday? Spending too much time reading Slack, avoiding my most difficult tasks, planning each morning, never put the phone down. And that is a big one where when we're getting distracted, then we actually create that experience for someone else that they're not important even when we're not intending them to feel that way. Managing multiple deadlines and not finishing one thing at a time. Eating lunch at my desk, not taking a break, answering emails as soon as they arrive in my inbox rather than carving out time, procrastinating, jumping between jobs. So this is really important as far as being intentional about our day and how we manage our time. Because when we allow these things to happen, we start building stress in our bodies. We start getting really frustrated, and then we show up to meetings because we know all this is happening and we're not getting something done. Or we're not asking somebody, do I actually need to be in that meeting? Sometimes we're invited to meetings just to be nice. And so actually pushing back on some meetings and saying, do I really need to be in this meeting? And is there an agenda for that meeting? Because if you see that there are other people that you can delegate that meeting to, it's important to give them the opportunity to be in that meeting so that you don't have 5 people sitting in a meeting instead of getting work done. But this is what happens a lot of times in our meetings. So when we start taking a focus, so the one thing that you chose, how can that give us little moments of freedom every single day? And that is what this is about. It's the awareness that this is happening. But then what is the action to give us a little bit of freedom to change our energy and how we react to people during the workday? So this is the piece of the mindfulness and collaboration that comes in. And it really takes us actually stepping back to disconnect, to get present in order to connect with the people around us. And that can be in as short as 2 minutes. It takes 2 minutes to reset our central nervous system. So we can close our eyes, we can do a guided meditation, we can take a walk, we can listen to music, whatever it is to shift our energy from one meeting to the next meeting so that we can connect people for that and that we're actually making space for people to be creative. The thing about innovation is we forget to learn. We forget how to learn because we've been down this path of being an expert in what we do. So if we're trying to change things in our organization or implement new technology, we've actually got to create space for that. And actually, ExpensiCon has a great way of doing it. Not all of us can afford the way that they do it. But the reason they found this place is because they do something called offshores, where they take the entire company for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I've heard both. Yeah, 3 weeks to another country. And the whole company decides where they're going to go. And that is for this collaboration piece. And when we are living in this remote world of working and everybody's in different spots, how can we create these moments of creativity? It doesn't mean people have to be in the office every day for that to happen. But it is important we create this human connection. And what happens when they go out and do this is that they're collaborating face to face with people that they haven't seen in person in their jobs for a really long time. So when we're talking about in firms that we've got these remote workplaces and we're struggling with the human connection, we can create these little time periods of innovation time period where we expect people, where we actually say, here's a project that I want you to work on. The partners are not going to work on it. You guys are going to work on it. And I'm going to give you space to work on this project and find solutions of how they do this. Now, I also did this in my accounting firm, but I did it in a different way where I would call it coffee talk. And so I gave them a Starbucks card and I'd match two people up that didn't normally work together. And they had 30 minutes a month to meet together and talk about, surface up the issues that they saw in the business, that they saw were issues for clients or things that were duplication of work and so forth. And then they would come back in our staff meetings and present out what they came up with in those 30-minute talks. So there's, short and easy ways, or you can take a trip together to another country. But it is really important that we find these moments for people to connect, and especially people that don't normally work together every single day, so that they see different thought processes and they see different things that you're doing. One of the ways that I think is really important is getting a new hobby. So when we create a new hobby, it's really hard because we're not good at it. So I like to have these 30-day challenges where you have to go out and learn something new and come back and talk about it with your team members. I'm not going to add whoever said Slack, but you can have a Slack channel with your 30-day challenge of what they're going to do to learn something new. But I can tell you, one of the things that I learned new was playing bass guitar. I had played violin and viola growing up, but I wanted to play rock. My kids were in rock and they were playing, one was singing, one was playing drums, and the other was playing guitar. And I was like, I want to play bass and play with them. So I went to this school of rock program that had an adult program, and I said to them, I want to learn. And they said, okay, it's good. We have a Rock 101 program, and all of the people are new, so you'll be starting out with all new people. Well, I get to the first rehearsal with my brand new bass, and it was a bunch of men that had been playing in their basement that had never come out of their basement. They were not new at this at all. They were really good at guitar. And one of the things that I realized, though, as frustrating as it was to not be as good as everybody, was the fact that I don't care. I'm playing rock, right? And I had to get to the point of not having to be perfect at everything. And the reason that this becomes important is getting back to this beginner's mind. That we forget what it's like to be a beginner because we're so far in our careers, we're leaders, we're experts in what we do, that it's very hard to remember what it's like to be a beginner again. And when you don't know something and how you have to learn, and even remembering yourself how you learn something new. And so when we give space for people to go do this, we actually start creating an environment to be more innovative. So I thought this was a great interview. So I'm going to let him talk, but he was the CEO of the Institute of Management Accountants, and this was a great story.
So I was always kind of a math statistics person, very technical, quantitative. I know we kind of get typecast into thinking that that's all it's about, but being in the math and sciences, you actually become a bit of an explorer. And so, there's a little typecasting there, but so that part was very clear. I was good in math and statistics through high school. That was my major in college and then graduate school. But along that way, I had to say, all right, what's my career going to be? And, I actually decided to go into the teaching program undergraduate. And one of the primary reasons that I wanted to become a teacher is because I'm inherently shy. And although, of course, teaching has an incredible societal purpose and virtues, I've been married to a teacher. Quite frankly, I said to myself, I ultimately see myself in a business role. In my role as president and CEO of IMA, I talk around the world. I'm going to the Middle East next month. I've been in China. We have offices there. And, by definition, it's a public speaking role. But I knew way back then that, I'm inherently shy. I still get a little bit of tingle and nervousness in front of a large group.
Sure.
I kind of think it's natural.
Yeah.
But I think to myself, what better way to overcome my inherent shyness than going through a teaching program to be a math teacher? I did student teaching, and if nothing will eliminate your shyness than being in front of 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds at 7:22 in the morning, trying to teach them high school math, nothing will get you over shyness. So I went through the student teaching to the point where I did make a choice early on to go into industry. But I really do think that recognition of where I needed to strengthen, if I were to look at my future and not say, well, I'm naturally shy, so I'm going to stay away from anything that involves public speaking. I do think there is so much more under your control as a human being, and seize control where you need to make it happen. You talk a lot in, Business Balance and Bliss about taking control and breaking away or seizing opportunity to fill gaps. And, to this day, even though I'm still inherently shy and still nervous in front of big groups, it's like you wouldn't know it, right? Because of that decision early on to say, you put yourself in front of a bunch of 15-year-olds at 7 in the morning.
Let them rip you apart. Yeah.
Right. And they just love math and algebra. And
exactly. So I just thought that was such a great story. I mean, that's the worst possible thing to put yourself in front of teenagers if you're inherently shy. But a lot of times when we think about doing these things, we go towards something we're good at. And I loved his perspective of taking something that's a gap or an opportunity for us to grow that's going to help us in another area. And that's where he went to learn. And I think that's not naturally something that most of us do, and where you could do that with your teams. So this is where community is such an important thing that we have to create. And I'm going to give away one of my books today, but I just put out a book called Disconnect to Connect. But in the book, I talk about this circle of trust that you create, that there are people that you can go to that will help you in this journey, and where you can create this safe space for people to learn and to be vulnerable. And the thing is, as a leader, if we're not vulnerable, other people will not be vulnerable. Everyone looks to you to see how to behave, how to act, what's acceptable. And even when we try to be something we're not, people notice. They know when it's not right or it's not uncomfortable, and they'll talk about it, as you've probably seen with other leaders that you can think about as an example where you didn't buy into who they were trying to be because they weren't being vulnerable and open to who they are. So creating this circle of trust, I believe, is really important. That can be with people outside of work. That can be friends. That can be family. But it also can be with people that are your opposites, so that you feel that you're in a safe space. So for me, being extroverted, it's important that I have people that are introverted to give me feedback as an advisor, as someone I trust, to give me that feedback in a safe space. And I take that in a way to help me so that I can make them comfortable in meetings and situations. It's not just about how I'm going to go through a process that's natural to me. So this is where, and I talked about coffee talk already, but this is something that where you can bring team innovation into the process and not try to do it alone. Because I think so many times we go behind closed doors and we know that we're trying to work on the business, but the staff doesn't know. And when the staff doesn't know, in the gap of silence, they assume nothing's getting done. They assume nothing is happening. And then they're getting frustrated that they hear in the annual meeting, there's going to be all this change in the firm, and then they see nothing and they're not a part of it. So how can you incorporate them into the process so that they are a part of that as we go through that? So the last part of this is bliss and how we maintain that happiness. And bliss is something that we have to work on each day. And mindfulness is something that isn't actually very natural to us. That term is used a lot, of be mindful. And a lot of people don't even know what that actually means, right? And so the first part of it is really trying to get present. So when we took that couple minutes to get present, where you closed your eyes and you just went internal, those moments that we can take in our day, however we do that, because it may not be closing your eyes, it may mean you've got to shift your energy in another way, but so that we become present in the next situation we're going to be in. Because what happens is we have monkey mind, right? And that monkey mind is that our thoughts go branch to branch to branch, and we're not keeping a coherent thought. So it's important that we go into this in a way to really help us be present. So figuring out how to get present is the first step in mindfulness. Once we can get still, if we're going to go into a meeting with someone else and we want to either give them feedback or have them give us feedback, it is important that we meet them where they're at in that moment, and that is acceptance. So we might have stories about them from the past. They might have stories about us, but we've got to walk into that situation accepting them as they are in this moment and try to leave the color out. Because when we can see them as they are, the next piece of mindfulness, which can be the really hard part when we're frustrated with somebody, is meeting them with compassion. So meeting them with compassion for where they're at in that moment, and then observing it, taking in that feedback without responding. Saying, I will get back to you on that. Let yourself get a moment. Assess what they actually said, maybe what their body language was, all these other things before you respond. And this is a great interview with Jeremy Jones. He's from Fraser and Dieter in the US. But he's talking about the 360 feedback process. And you might have heard of what that is before, which is getting evaluated by people that work for you, your peers, and the people above you. But he did it live.
Actually, this same time last year, I had a live 360. I don't know if you've ever done a live 360.
No, what is that?
It's so basically, and I don't recommend anybody do this, but from I do it. But it's a practice we've started here at Fraser and Dieter, where I will go into a room and I will have between 6 and 8 people in the room with me. Some will be my partners, and others will be managers or people below me. And it's a chance for about an hour where they just download on me everything good, everything bad, what I need to improve on, how I need to improve, whatever it may be. And then the takeaway from that is I then have real actionable items I need to work on.
Right.
And so last year, during our training week, I sat in front of the entire audit practice. And
oh, wow.
It was hindsight's 2020 on that one. It might not have been the best decision, but I sat in front of the whole audit practice, and I had a group of people that I really consider trustworthy and open and honest give me feedback in front of everybody. So all that being said, delegation is a thing I struggle with. So
right.
That's something I'm still trying to work with constantly. And every one of those people on the panel said, you got to get rid of some stuff. You got to trust others.
Right.
And one person even said, I feel like you never trust me.
Wow.
And that was not the truth, but that kind of cut to
So
me.
what did you do to shift that after?
I just downloaded everything I had to.
You're like, now you just done more work.
No, she and I mean, we had some very deep conversations around, the trust factor and why she felt that way and why I never, gave her the stuff that she thought she could handle. And it did shift our relationship, and I give her a lot more, I trust her a lot more with things.
Right. Yeah. That's a really hard thing to do.
Oh yeah.
So if you can imagine how you have to put mindfulness in place to sit in a room with all of those people giving you feedback, and how you get present and not take offense. And one of the things we talked about in this interview that was really important was that some of the feedback that was coming back to him, he didn't necessarily agree with, right? Just because someone gives you feedback doesn't mean you have to agree with it. However, because he was listening and doing the active listening and really trying to understand, he was like, they think that because I didn't explain X, Y, and Z, and they didn't know all of that, so they're coming up with their own assumption. But he didn't know that was sitting there with them. So then he took the opportunity of like, well, the reason that that's happening is because of all these decisions we had to make that you're not aware of. And this is where vulnerability and openness is so important in order to make sure as a leader that you're not allowing people to fill the gap with their own opinions and their own thoughts and negativity when there's something actually that was a much simpler answer that you just didn't disclose, right? And being able to have those open conversations is really important. So what we can do is lead by example, allow people to shadow us, allow people to be in rooms that they've never been in before. One of the best examples, I think, in accounting practices is staff people don't even understand that they need to be salespeople in order to be managers and partners later on. They've never been given those skill sets. They never actually sat in a sales meeting. Or they want to become a manager one day, but they don't understand what that client communication is and so forth. How do you allow them to be in the room and just shadow it so that they learn what are my gaps in my skill sets that I need to learn? Because the problem is we give them a bunch of technical training, but not necessarily the communication skills and the relationship skills and the sales training that they need in order to grow and evolve in our practices. And then I think this is really important because this really starts at the staff level. Is how do we teach to be careful with how we give feedback? And be very careful that we're not hurting someone in the process because we're too busy. And we might fly off and say something without intention that someone else takes in a different way. Or, I mean, even all the way down to review notes. How are we writing review notes? Are we training people on how to give review notes to make sure that they're not being offensive in the way that they're saying it or causing someone to want to quit because they feel like someone's really mad at them because they put an exclamation point, but that's just not how they were feeling. They were just writing it really fast. So it's important that we put all of these parameters in place in our business from the culture side and the people side so that they feel like we care. Because most people get glued to the organization they're in because they feel like the organization cares about them. But when they feel like they don't, that's when they're open to take the salary leap and to take other things. If they feel like they're in a safe environment and they're getting benefits and so forth, it's very hard to give that up because you know you can go somewhere else and not have that culture and environment. It does matter. And so when we're giving feedback, there's something called radical candor of giving feedback in a way that people know you personally care. I am completely against annual reviews. And the reason I am is because you only remember the last month during the annual reviews, right? There's no real-time feedback and people like hold on to feedback to go write it down eventually in a form. Instead of right after that meeting saying, you know what, next time when you're in that meeting, what I'd like you to do is this. And give them real-time feedback so they can improve, not wait to catch a score, right? It's how we actually show that we care, that we develop a relationship with them, that we know everybody's names, we know their spouse's names, we know their kids' names. They know we care about them, that we're not rushing through to do it. And what Jeremy talked about, this is one of the hardest things in accounting profession is trusting and delegating, because everyone thinks they know the right way to do things and no one else is going to know what they know. But part of it is we haven't taken the time to train someone. We haven't taken the time to let them, what I call, go fish, right? They're going to come to you and ask you for the answer. But what we should be saying back to them is, why don't you go get the answer and then let's talk about it. So even if they don't get the right answer, at least you know how they're thinking, what path they're going down, how their brain works, so that you can help them grow. Not everything is in a training room. Those are the things that actually grow our people. And the other thing is to be their confidant. that you understand the situations that they're dealing with in their personal lives and how you work around that as well. Or when people have times a day that they can't take meetings. I hear this all the time when I do time management sessions, is like, my boss has a meeting every day at 7:30. How do I tell them I can't do that meeting because I've got to take my kids to school, I've got to do this and that, and people feel like they can't speak up. So when you're setting recurring meetings, are you actually asking your team, is this a good time for us to be meeting? Or is there a better time that we should set as a team? So all of those things matter. They're little things, but they matter along the way. And then to remember, as we go through change and process and innovation, is to celebrate the small wins along the way. Is that we often don't look up to think about that because our brains will actually go toward what's not working instead of what is working. That we don't actually focus on all of those things. And so the power of thank you is a really important thing because people remember that. They remember a note. They put up notes. They remember an email that they got. They remember that you came by and said they did a great job on something. People want to be noticed that they're working really hard. And we forget that they care just as much as we do. And they want to know that you see that. So one of the things that I think is important is to understand when we go through our journey as a leader and in our careers, what will make us happy. And so for a long time in my career, I could not figure out what that was. So I had a manager that actually stopped me. I was getting this great review. There was one thing I didn't like on it, and then I was focused on it, right? And so they stepped back and said, what would make you happy? And I sat there and I'm like, I'm actually not sure. I thought I knew, but I actually could never answer this question. And so as I grew in my career and I was accomplishing, that question was just always in my head. And one of the things when I talked about my story in the beginning, I kept thinking, I'm going to get out of this situation with my family and the financial struggles because when I go to college, this is going to change everything, right? And I went to University of Cincinnati, and when you walk up the hill to go to orientation, you're standing over the stadium, which is Nippert Stadium. And I remember standing there as an 18-year-old going, I am just so excited for getting out of my situation, what my life will be, and so forth, what this means to go to college. And so I went through my whole career. This is my son, Jagger. And when he was going to University of Cincinnati, he had an orientation, and we were walking up this hill, and all of a sudden I see Nippert Stadium, and I'm like, stop, I need you to turn around. And I took a picture of him, and I'm like, I can finally answer this question. Being there for him, watching my other son accomplish, having this career that I was able to give them the access to be able to live their dreams. I was so focused that it was the job that was going to make me happy, but there were so many other things that mattered of what the benefits were of the things that I was doing. And it's the same thing for the people around us. And so it's important that we deploy a gratitude practice, that we stay optimistic, because what happens is our brains go toward the negative naturally. When we come home from work each day, what we talk about are the bad things that happen, right? Or who frustrated us or something. Instead of looking for the good, we've got to train our brain to look for the good. And looking for the good can be that the sun came out today, someone smiled at us. It doesn't have to be something major. But where we look for this, if you can find 2 to 3 things a day that actually you're grateful for, and you write it down each day, it will make you look for it during your day, and it actually shifts your energy and how you feel and the happiness that you create for yourselves, and also that energy that you create around you. So what I'd like you to do is just come back to the survey app, and if you can think of one thing that we talked about that you can start making a commitment the next 30 days. Remember, it takes 30 days to create a habit. But what's one thing that you could make a commitment to, put on your calendar, and do each day to ensure that you are able to do this? And is it going live on yours? All right. I don't know why. It didn't hit. Maybe the Wi-Fi went out on that. Put it in your app. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Anyone want to volunteer? First one to volunteer gets a book. What's one thing you were going to write down? Yeah. Keeps moving around. Yes. Try to help get still. And so there you go. Congratulations. So the thing is that do you have an app like Headspace or Calm? Okay. Yeah, so that will help with like if you do 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And the thing with meditation, if anyone's interested in doing that, is to make sure that you don't overcommit, right? So some people will be like, I can't sit there for that long. You can do it for 5 minutes and then expand it. Once you get good with 5 minutes, then go to 10 minutes, then go to 15 so that you feel comfortable. For me, 10 minutes is my max. And then I might do it multiple times in the day. So try to take the pressure off with that as you're doing it. So this is a little poem that I thought was so good about change. And what it says is a question marks the spot where wisdom grows, stretching up and out, around and through the decaying matter of what we thought we knew. Verbs reside in what we long to do, in stillness and song and soaring breakthrough. United together, think what we could do. So if we take this connected leader journey and we do it all together and we don't try to do it alone, how can we better bond with our teams and create the energy that we want to do together? And this is the methodology that you can look more into yourself. If you want to stick with me with anything, these are places that you can find me. But I want to thank you, and hopefully you were able to take away one thing that you can incorporate into your daily life and start going on this journey. So thank you very much.